You know that feeling that visits you in the quietest hours of the night? That moment when you stop in front of your bathroom mirror after another apparently productive day and wonder why, despite all your achievements, relationships, and accumulated experiences, there is still this inexplicable hole in your chest. This sensation that something fundamental is missing. As if you're living someone else's life, playing a role you didn't consciously choose. If you've experienced this, know that you're not alone. In fact, you're experiencing one of the most characteristic phenomena of our era, the existential emptiness of modernity. And today, we'll explore together not just why this happens, but mainly how we can understand and transform this seemingly universal experience of the 21st century. This feeling of emptiness isn't your fault. It's not a sign of weakness, depression, or lack of gratitude for the life you've built. It is in fact a perfectly rational response to a world that has lost its traditional anchors of meaning without offering genuine substitutes in return. To truly understand this condition, we need to look at human history with the necessary perspective to understand how we got here. For most of human history, the meaning of individual life wasn't a personal question to be resolved. For tens of thousands of years, your ancestors woke up each morning knowing exactly what their place in the world was. They were hunters, gatherers, later farmers or craftsmen, defined by clear social roles within small and cohesive communities. Their purpose was determined by tradition, religion, family, and the immediate need for survival. The question, what is the meaning of my life, simply didn't exist in the form we know it today, because the answer was embedded in the very structure of society. Imagine waking up in a medieval village. You're the blacksmith's son, so you'll be a blacksmith. You were born Catholic, so you'll follow church teachings. Your life has a clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. Birth, work, marriage, children, death, salvation, or damnation. Every action, every decision, every moment of pain or joy had its place within a greater cosmic narrative that gave meaning to everything. There was no existential crisis because there was no existential choice. Individual freedom, as we understand it today, was a non-existent concept. But then something revolutionary happened, starting in the 18th century with the Enlightenment and accelerating brutally during the 19th and 20th centuries. Humanity underwent an unprecedented transformation. We tore down, one by one, all the traditional structures that provided ready-made meaning for human life. Science challenged religion. Industrialization destroyed millennial rural communities. Capitalist individualism fragmented extended families. Social and geographic mobility broke fixed identities based on class and location. This process was simultaneously modernity's greatest triumph and greatest tragedy. We gained individual freedom, human rights, unprecedented opportunities, technologies our ancestors would consider magical. But we lost something they considered even more fundamental, an automatic sense of purpose and place in the world. We became free to choose who we want to be, but this also means we're obligated to choose who we want to be. And this constant obligation to self-create meaning is paradoxically one of the greatest sources of existential anxiety of our time. What makes this situation even more complex is that our contemporary society offers apparent substitutes for lost meaning, but these substitutes are fundamentally inadequate to fill the void left by ancient certainties. We've been taught to seek fulfillment through professional success, material consumption, accumulation of experiences, romantic relationships, self-image on social media. But each of these sources of meaning is, by its nature, temporary and fragile. Consider work, for example. For many people, career has become the main source of identity and purpose. I am a doctor, I am an engineer, I am an entrepreneur. But what happens when you realize that your work, no matter how well paid or socially valued, doesn't touch the deepest questions about what it means to be alive? What happens when you retire, lose your job, or simply wake up one morning realizing you're dedicating most of your conscious life to activities that don't resonate with your deepest values? Consumerism offers another seductive substitute. The implicit promise is that happiness and meaning can be bought. The next smartphone, the next car, the next trip, the next outfit, the next course, the next self-help book will finally fill the void. But any honest person who has lived long enough knows that the pleasure of consumption is necessarily fleeting. The dopamine of purchase dissipates in days or weeks, and the emptiness returns, often larger than before. Social media has created a new category of existential substitute: constant external validation. Likes, comments, followers, the careful curation of an apparently perfect life online. But this only amplifies the fundamental problem, because now we not only live lives that may lack genuine meaning, but we also spend considerable time performing these lives for an audience doing exactly the same thing. It's a spiral of superficiality that distances us even further from fundamental existential questions. I want to pause for a moment to ask you directly: when was the last time you felt an inexplicable emptiness, even while surrounded by all the things that should make you happy? Perhaps it was after a job promotion you fought to get, or after buying something you'd wanted for months, or even after a fun night with friends. You came home and in the quiet felt that something essential was still missing. I know we often keep these feelings to ourselves, perhaps out of shame or fear of seeming ungrateful for the life we've built. But this experience is more common than we imagine. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this emptiness when I'm," and completing it with your personal experience. Your honesty might be exactly what another person needs to read today to feel less alone in this silent struggle so many of us face. But why exactly do these modern substitutes fail so consistently to fill the existential void? The answer lies in the fundamental nature of what it means to be human. We are, by our own evolution, creatures that create meaning through narratives. Our brain doesn't just process information, it constantly tries to build coherent stories about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. We need a sense of temporal continuity, transcendent purpose, connection to something greater than ourselves. Modern substitutes fail because they are, in their essence, centered on the individual self and the immediate present. They don't offer the broad temporal dimension our psyche needs. A successful career can last decades, but what about after retirement and after death? Consumption offers pleasure in the present, but what narrative does it build about who you are at 80? Social media creates an illusion of connection, but what kind of legacy or continuity do they offer beyond the ephemeral? Digital technology, which should connect us more to each other, often amplifies our existential isolation. We spend hours daily interacting with interfaces, algorithms, and edited versions of other people, but how much time do we spend in silent contemplation, in deep conversations about fundamental questions, in activities that connect us to broader dimensions of existence? The technological acceleration of our era creates a constant sense of urgency that prevents the kind of slow and deep reflection necessary to build genuine meaning. Furthermore, we live in an era of choice overload that our ancestors never faced. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the more anxious we become about whether we're making the right choices. Our grandparents might have had 3 or 4 possible professions in their hometown. Today, you can theoretically do anything, live anywhere, be anyone. This unlimited freedom, which should be liberating, often becomes paralyzing. How do you choose a life path among infinite possibilities? And how can you be sure the chosen path is the right one? This choice anxiety extends to all areas of modern life. How many people should you date before committing to one? Which career will maximize both personal fulfillment and financial security? How many children to have? And when? Which religion to follow, if any? How to balance personal ambition with social responsibility? Where to invest your time, money, and emotional energy for a well-lived life? Our ancestors didn't face this paralysis of choices because their options were limited by external circumstances. Paradoxically, these limitations created a sense of inner freedom, because once the life path was externally defined, they could focus on how to live well within those limitations instead of constantly questioning whether they were on the right path. But perhaps the deepest aspect of modern emptiness is related to our disconnection from natural cycles and biological rhythms that governed human experience for millennia. Our bodies and minds evolved to live in sync with day and night rhythms, seasons, agricultural cycles, natural patterns of work and rest. Modern life has disconnected us almost completely from these ancestral rhythms. We work under artificial light, eat processed foods at irregular hours, sleep in climate-controlled environments disconnected from seasons, spend most of our time in indoor environments, interacting more with screens than with natural landscapes. This disconnection isn't just physical, it's existential. We've lost the sense of being embedded in larger cycles that transcend us, of being part of something that existed before us and will continue existing after us. Nature has always provided humans with a sense of perspective and humility that is fundamental to psychological well-being. When you're before a mountain, an ocean, a starry sky, your personal problems don't disappear, but they assume a different proportion. You feel part of something infinitely larger and older than your individual concerns. This experience of cosmic smallness is paradoxically liberating and comforting. But how many people in modern urban environments have regular access to this perspective? Spiritual disconnection is another fundamental aspect of contemporary emptiness. I'm not necessarily talking about organized religion, but about the universal human capacity to experience transcendent dimensions of existence. For tens of thousands of years, all human cultures developed ritual, contemplative, and spiritual practices that allowed individuals to access states of consciousness that transcended ordinary concerns of daily life. These practices, meditation, prayer, fasting, ritual dance, ceremonial use of psychedelic plants, pilgrimages, silent retreats, nature contemplation, weren't luxuries or hobbies, but fundamental psychological necessities. They allowed people to regularly access perspectives that placed their individual lives in broader contexts of meaning and purpose. Secular modernity not only abandoned these practices, but often ridiculed them as primitive superstition. We replaced the sacred with the scientific, the transcendent with the material, the eternal with the temporal. But what we gained in empirical knowledge, we lost in existential wisdom. Science can explain to us how things work, but it can't tell us why we should care about being alive. This isn't a criticism of the scientific method, which is one of humanity's greatest achievements, but a recognition that science, by its very nature, cannot address questions of meaning and value. It can tell us we're made of atoms that formed in dead stars billions of years ago, but it can't tell us whether this should make us feel insignificant or deeply connected to the cosmos. It can map our brains in extraordinary detail, but it can't tell us what to do with our consciousness while we have it. The result is that we live in an era of unprecedented knowledge, but also unprecedented existential confusion. We know more about the universe, about human biology, psychology, history, and society than any previous generation. But this knowledge by itself doesn't automatically translate into wisdom about how to live well. In fact, it may even amplify existential emptiness, because the more we understand about the vastness and apparent indifference of the cosmos, the harder it becomes to maintain comforting illusions about our special place in it. Consider, for example, what modern cosmology teaches us. We live on a small planet orbiting a common star in a galaxy that contains hundreds of billions of other stars, and our galaxy is one among trillions in the observable universe. Earth existed for 4.5 billion years before humans appeared, and will probably continue existing for billions of years after we disappear. In cosmic terms, all of human history is less than a blink of an eye. This perspective can be both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it suggests that our daily anxieties and concerns are, in cosmic context, trivial. Terrifying because it suggests that our lives may be, in cosmic context, completely insignificant. How do we process this information without falling into nihilism or existential paralysis? Here we arrive at the heart of the matter. Modern emptiness isn't caused by lack of information, opportunities, or material resources. It's caused by the lack of conceptual and practical frameworks